This Friday, the Liberal Party is gathering for a convention in Ottawa, hoping to restore their political fortunes. They've actually been on a pretty long slide, and things were looking grim until recently, but they have had a bit of a rebound. But one of the things they're going to be talking about at this convention, which I'm not sure is going to captivate the attention, let alone the support of Canadians, is a Young Liberals resolution to sever ties with the monarchy. They've made this a priority resolution. It's going to be debated on the convention floor. I'm joined now by Amanda Alvaro. She's a Liberal strategist and the founding managing director of Narrative Advocacy Media in Toronto. Is this really something that the Liberal Party should be talking about now?
Well, I think that, like all of the policy resolutions that are going to be debated on the floor, democracy is about bringing what you need to bring to the floor to have that debate. And if the Young Liberals feel that this is a policy resolution that should be debated, they made it a priority resolution, then certainly it's something that we'll see on the debate floor this weekend. Whether or not it captures the attention, as you've stated, it certainly captured the media attention. And we've seen over the last week, whether you agree with it or you disagree with it, it's made some headlines, and it's certainly given food for thought as we head into the convention.
Well, okay, in that sense, it served as journalism bait. They dangled cheese and we came out of our hole and nibbled at it. But I know that the resolution is actually called Canadian Identity in the 21st Century. Mm-hmm. So part of this is a Liberal Party belief that we can choose our own identity, that the 21st century means we need a new one, and that there's something about the monarchy that's old-fashioned. So to some extent, this may give us a sense of Liberal branding efforts.
Well, you know, and if you look at how Canadians have felt on this issue, there's sort of been ebbs and flows, particularly over the last decade. In 2002, when Canadians were polled on this topic in particular, they were very divided. Canadians felt that it was an important part of our heritage and at the same time felt that it was sort of an outdated institution. With the recent popularity of the royal family and the royal wedding and Will and Kate's visit to Canada, we saw a new surge in popularity around the monarchy. So although it may not be a mainstream issue to debate, and probably not the kind of issue that needs to be debated in the context of all the other issues facing Canadians, it's certainly one that does cause a little bit of polarization between those who fiercely want to keep things intact, the status quo, and those who want to move away.
Yeah, and I noticed one columnist was criticizing the motion on the grounds that the monarchy was more popular than the Liberal Party. I'm certainly not going to give you any grief on that score because I'm so tired of politicians who pander to public opinion instead of trying to change it when they feel that the public is mistaken. I'm happy to see someone go somewhere and try and see if anyone will follow them. But on the other hand, some people think that the enthusiasm of youth is refreshing. Others of us just find that it upsets our digestion. What I don't understand is if we get rid of the monarchy, what do we replace it with? It's so simple to say, oh, well, I don't like the Queen. That feels kind of 18th century. But you've got to put something in its place.
Yeah, and the resolution talks about having the Parliament of Canada put together an all-party committee to look at head of state in general and to consider the severing of ties with the monarchy. But, you know, this policy resolution, while feeling a little bit out of left field, certainly not as mainstream as some of the other policies that will be discussed, is not necessarily that out of left field. You'll remember that the Young Liberals were the same young people who put same-sex marriage on the agenda. So it's not, you know, it's not uncommon for them to put some bold, a little edgier, a little more controversial issues on the agenda for policy conventions.
Yeah, and you know, again, youth are like that. But the problem with youth, and I know because I was once young, is you don't always examine the consequences very carefully before you undertake some bold or reckless action. I mean, if we're going to have an elected head of state, they're going to become a player in the political process. And I think one of the great advantages of the monarchy is that the Queen's moral authority in a crisis derives precisely from the fact that she isn't engaged in any of the partisan controversies that go on. If she steps in, it's not to protect something she's previously been advocating, because she hasn't been advocating anything. So do we get a president like the Americans have, or do we get a president like the Germans apparently have, although it's rare that anybody remembers who he is?
True, and you know, throughout the resolution, the Young Liberals make a number of arguments, but interestingly enough, what they're saying is let's have the Parliament of Canada put together an all-party committee to discuss the issue, to put it back on the table. And like I said earlier, with the polls swaying, with the ebbs and flows of the polls that show popular opinion on this issue continues to move, it's not necessarily an issue that we shouldn't consider altogether. And as we know, Australia's dealt with this issue over the last number of years, over the last decade. They even held a referendum on it. I know people have said this policy could be the kiss of death, but certainly when you look at a country like Australia and what they've been able to debate in their own country, the monarchy's still alive. It certainly wasn't the kiss of death for the party.
No, that is indeed true. But I do want to try and put you on the spot, at least with this question. You look at everybody who's been prominent in public life in this country over the last 60 years. Who can possibly compare to Her Majesty in terms of her conduct being above reproach? Surely, of all the people you don't want to get rid of on the basis of anything they actually did, she's at the top of the list. And Prince Charles, occupying a very difficult post, has occasionally embarrassed himself, but and Prince Philip obviously has that penchant for saying what he really thinks instead of what he ought to say, and knowing there's a microphone. But realistically, who would you admire more than the Queen, who's had a prominent public post over the last half century?
I don't disagree with you. In fact, from a public reputation standpoint, she has been absolutely lauded for having an almost flawless reputation. That certainly hasn't been the case with Prince Charles, and is yet to be seen with the newcomers, who of course have a high standing in popularity, Prince William and Kate. But Her Majesty the Queen has had an almost flawless stand in her position and post. So I don't disagree with you that she has been a bit beyond reproach in that way.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts on this, but I am going to conclude with one of my own. Of all the problems that bedevil this country and that bright minds ought to be turning their attention to, a monarch above reproach whose grandchild just had a fairy tale wedding, it seems to me just isn't that high on the list. If this was just bait to get public attention, it worked, but there is a downside to that. I think that constitutional monarchy is a great system. I think the Queen is doing a great job. So that's where my dog is in this particular fight. But again, I do want to thank Amanda Alvaro for coming on and giving us her perspective on why the Liberal Party has at least a legitimate interest in raising this at their convention, which they do. Thanks for being with us. We'll see what happens on the convention floor.
Thank you.